Welcome to the Beer Frontier. My name is Gage.
And I'm Robert, and as ever, we're here for the beer. This week, we're going to be looking at porter.
We're going out to see what Ben the home brewer is doing.
We're going to try 2 local porters.
We'll visit Enzo and see what he's cooking.
We'll taste an imported porter.
And we'll go on the road and visit another microbrewery.
So, Gage, what is porter?
Well, porter's a dark beer, generally an ale, and it's like stout's little sister, so it's not quite as in your face normally as stouts can be. But we're actually looking at 2 slightly different styles today. We're looking at the local robust porters, typically alcohol content of about 5%, with a little bit of hop bitterness, but quite a lot of malt, of roasted malts and flavours from the malt and the yeast. And we'll also look at a Baltic porter, which is alcohol about 8% or so. It's actually a Polish one, which is probably a bit more like those imperial stouts, except confusingly, I think it's a lager. So this is a dark, rich, very complex beer, almost licorice molasses type flavours and aromas with very little hop bitterness, but higher alcohol.
Okay, and I believe you've got another beer in your bonnet this week too.
Yeah,
Tell us about that.
I always do. It's where we buy our beer from. We have to all buy beer from a variety of places, and it's not just about price. Up the very top, you've got the 2 big chains. Woolworths trading as Safeway, Dan Murphy, BWS and ALH. I'm never sure why the price varies from brand to brand, by the way. And we've got Coles, which is trading as Liquorland, Vintage Cellars and First Choice.
Okay, there's quite a few other ones too. There's like Celebrations and Bottle-O and Thirsty Camel and other ones like that.
Yeah, they're what's called buying groups. So they're independently owned businesses who band together to buy, so do group buying. The only problem with those guys is the range seems to be identical in every shop I go to.
Yeah.
So after that, we have the genuine independents. The genuine independents who aren't controlled by buying groups, aren't big company, so they can't always be the cheapest. But what they can offer is advice. So what I'm saying here, Robert, is we should all try and buy beer from a variety of places. Otherwise, as consumers, we'll lose out and there'll be less choice, less diversity.
Yes, an excellent idea. Now let's go and see what Ben the home brewer is up to.
Hello and welcome back to my kitchen. Today we're going to be making ourselves a yeast starter. Now, what is that, you might ask? Well, quite simply, let's have a look. We've got our yeast here. This is what you guys would know as yeast, I'm sure. And most of the time, you snip off the corner and you pop that into your sweet wort, and then that ferments away and does its job. Fair enough, it will work. But the reason you might make a starter is because the amount of yeast cells in here are nowhere near enough to take hold of that beer fast enough. And the net result is that basically other yeasts, wild yeasts or bugs, may get in there before this yeast, and they'll be preferential in brewing that beer, and therefore will come out with all sorts of off and undesirable flavours. So reason for the yeast starter is that we're going to build up this to be a much, much larger colony of yeast, billions of cells, so that we can actually make it the dominant yeast to make the beer that we want. Okay, how do we do it? Well, quite simple. Basically, we're going to make a mini beer. I've got here some light malt extract just to help you guys understand. This is the same stuff you get in a can without the hops, which is exactly the same thing as light dry malt extract. The only difference is we've removed the water. This is the stuff that you really want to be using. It's easy, it's dry, and all we have to do is rehydrate it. So all I'm going to be doing is using a certain amount of this to try and replicate the beer that I'm going to be making later on, that this starter is going to go into. You would of course measure this. what you would normally use is this wonderful device called a hydrometer. And as you can plainly see, mine is a bit broken. Gives you a bit of an idea. Perhaps it's a good idea to buy a second one of these in case you break it. This is probably the most important brewer's tool that you can own. This will tell us how much sugar is in our water, both at the start and at the end of our fermentation. So it's going to tell us how much alcohol we have in our finished beer, and it's going to tell us when our beer is ready. Without this, we can't be making beer. In this instance though, I've done this a few times before. I know that I'm going to need probably 300 grams or something like that in my starter. So what could you use? Well, you use one of these sort of things for making up a starter. You can buy those at your homebrew store. Use any old sort of bottles if you want. You're simply going to be popping a airlock in the top and putting a rubber seal on there. In this instance, I'm using one of these. I'm going to be building up about 2 litre starter. Okay, that's because the rule of 10 to 1 is ideal. If you want a 20 litre batch of beer, you're going to be making a 2 litre starter. We're going to be building up our yeast to the right amount of cells by doing that. So let's get this started. Quite simply, I've got myself my 2 litres of water, and I'm just going to put in, of course I've measured it, roughly about 300 grams of light dry malt extract. There you go, piling it in there. So once that's in, I'm simply going to set this on to go and bring it up to the boil.
Welcome back to the keg room, and now we're going to look at our local porters. We have Bridge Road Brewery's Robust Porter, and we've got Carlton Black from CUB.
The Bridge Road at 5.2% alcohol is from Bridge Road Brewery up in Beechworth, and the brewer up there makes about 10 different beers, and they're available on tap next door to the brewery, I think it is. And I once had an Austrian food, sort of schnitzels and things in the restaurant. I remember it was really nice. So they been around for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. I'm a bit vague on that. The Carlton Black is quite a different creature at 4.4% alcohol. The other was 5.2. Now, Foster's don't say this is porter, but a couple of their brewers, guys who work for them, once described it to me as a porter. So this is different, and I thought we'd give it a run. I thought we'd have a Be Nice to Foster's Day today.
Yeah, I must say, you don't see that round very much.
No, you don't. And they describe it themselves as a draft dark ale. So I'm not quite sure what they mean as a draft dark ale, but I think of it as a porter. So you've got the Bridge Road there?
Yeah, this is the Bridge Road, and it's quite a surprise. I'm very pleasantly surprised by this beer. In fact, when you were describing the beer, I was going, well, this is it in a glass. It epitomises the style, really, and yeah, hard to fault this beer. It's actually very, very palatable, very nice, full malty taste, everything like that. I think it's a 4-star beer, really.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to hold my thunder just for a moment on this, because sometimes on the beer frontier we find it a bit hard where we'd like to support local microbreweries, but apart from that boat rocker, pale ale, alpha ale we had once, we're generally scoring the European beers a lot higher. But this one is so true to style. I reckon this beer is an absolute knockout. I just think the guy's got it right on the head, and I think this is a 4.5-star beer. It is exactly what I would expect a robust porter to be like.
Yeah, it's a beauty.
So the Carlton?
The Carlton, well, on the other hand, shall we say, on the other hand, we have the Carlton Black, which is doesn't really smell of anything, doesn't really taste of anything. It's a bit run-of-the-mill and a bit insipid for my tastes. I think I'll be nice to Foster's and give it 2 stars. Okay.
Well, I'll say that I think this beer is really boring, and I'll give it 2 stars too. No, it was sort of they tried, but they just couldn't quite do it. So the Beechworth is miles ahead.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure.